Cousins back to throw on 4th and 18. He's given time. He wants Jefferson. Climbs the ladder. Oh my goodness! Justin Jefferson pulled it in. The catch of his life. Hurts has all day. Loaded up. Taking a shot. Looking for A.J. Brown. He's got it. Touchdown. Here's Prescott. Pressure again. Steps in. Just throws it deep as far as his arm can take him. Looking for Hilton. Oh, he caught it. A bomb on 3rd and 30.
The NFC South will probably be the NFL's worst division this season, but I also think it'll be the most competitive because there's maybe 3 and potentially all 4 teams that have a shot to win it. And the reason I think that is because they are all mediocre in their own special ways. It's also a very intriguing division because all 4 teams will have brand new starting quarterbacks this season, ranging from definite upgrades to definite downgrades to who knows. We can first start off with the Saints, who are the odds-on favorite to win the division according to multiple sportsbooks. Their new guy is Derek Carr, and while he did see some regression last season, he still is the best quarterback in the division by a good margin, at least for now. And they are the only team to have made the definitive upgrade at quarterback after alternating between Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton last season. Now, Carr had a lot of very visible issues last season, like a lack of creativity, a lack of ability to play out of structure, and accuracy issues that were very much on display, especially when it came to throwing deep. And while you can chalk that down to some of his struggles trying to learn a new system under Raiders coach Josh McDaniels, he's going to be in a new system this year under Pete Carmichael, so I'm a bit wary of how Carr is going to start this season, because I think we might see some of those struggles again. But Carr does have some upside. He can still be a good pocket passer on occasion, put a zip on the ball, and he's capable of making progressions really well, both being things that should be beneficial when he's throwing to 2 route-running savvy receivers in Chris Olave and Michael Thomas. Thomas has been injured to death in the last few seasons, so there's concerns about him, but Olave is someone I'm really excited about. He finished 2nd amongst rookies in receiving yards last season, ranked 2nd in the entire NFL in first downs per route run, and I think he's going to have a big second-year leap and really establish himself as the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Further development from guys like Rashid Shaheed and playing time for rookie A.T. Perry should give the Saints a solid wide receiver core. They won't have Alvin Kamara for the first 3 games, but Jamal Williams should be serviceable during that time, and I think Kamara can still contribute when he comes back, even though he's been on a steady decline for some time. The Saints should have a decent offense, and should have a decent defense as well if things go their way. And on that side of the ball, they're going to need some guys to hit the ground running pretty quickly. Out went David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, and Marcus Davenport, and in their place comes guys like Kalen Saunders, Nathan Shepard, and rookie Brian Breesy. Guys who all need to make an immediate impact if the Saints are going to replicate last year's defensive unit, which ranked 10th in EPA allowed and 8th in defensive DVOA. They also need new defensive coordinator Joe Woods to hit the ground running as well, who coached a Browns defense that finished 23rd in defensive DVOA, so who knows if those struggles continue in New Orleans. But they still have guys like Cam Jordan, Tyrann Mathieu, and star linebacker Demario Davis, 3 veterans who should all still make good to great contributions to the Saints. Overall, it should make for a defense that's around middle of the pack this season, which is pretty on par for the rest of the division. The team making the definitive downgrade of quarterback is the Buccaneers, who replaced the greatest player of all time with a Baker Mayfield who has, let's say, struggled in the past couple seasons, especially with accuracy. This is a team projected to finish last in the division by many people, and I can't say I blame them. They entirely relied upon a good passing offense to make up for a non-existent run game, and now have significantly downgraded the quarterback alongside losing starters like Shaq Mason and Donovan Smith on the offensive line, the former of whom they traded away for a 6th-round pick, which was a choice. And unless running back Rachaad White can make a massive improvement, that will likely be the case in 2023, which is not a good sign with a worse quarterback. That's not to say there's no reason for hope. New offensive coordinator Dave Canales played a big role in helping Geno Smith make his big leap last season in Seattle, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin is still one of the better receiving duos in the league, with the former registering his 9th 1,000-yard season last year. But man, unless we see a bounce-back year from Mayfield and a vastly improved run game, the Bucs are going to be on the struggle bus offensively. Tampa's defense should be decent though. They drafted Kalijah Kancey, a very athletic defensive tackle out of Pitt, in the first round to pair with Vita Vea. Levante David is still one of the best linebackers in football, and they still have guys like Antoine Winfield and Jamel Dean manning the secondary, the former of whom scored a top 10 PFF grade amongst safeties last season. But even though he's still good, Shaquille Barrett is only getting older, and Devin White still struggles in coverage, which isn't great for an off-the-ball linebacker. But those things aside, the Bucs should have a solid defense, right there with the Saints to be around middle of the pack, which they better hope and pray makes up for the offensive struggles that they will inevitably have. But if I had to make a prediction, it's probably going to be a tough ride for Tampa Bay this season. The two other teams with unknowns at quarterback are the Panthers and Falcons. For Carolina, they traded up to draft Bryce Young first overall, and I think he's going to have a pretty good rookie year. He was my QB1 heading into this year's draft and possesses great intangibles. He's smart, poised, incredibly accurate, and he can use his legs just as well. Young's got the chance to be the best QB in the division by season's end, and the Panthers have done their best to surround him with a good supporting cast. They hired Frank Reich to be their head coach, who coached guys like Andrew Luck and Carson Wentz to their best seasons in the league. They signed new pass catchers in Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, and tight end Hayden Hurst, and they drafted Jonathan Mingo, who received much hype before being picked on day 2 of the draft. But after trading away DJ Moore, the Panthers lack a true alpha wide receiver, and he's going to be a big loss this season. But this season, they may have a more well-rounded wide receiver core, and that alongside Reich should give Young at least some stability. Bradley Bozeman and Taylor Moton are still around on the offensive line, and we should get a second-year improvement from Ike Ekwonu as well, although the offensive line as a unit may be middle of the road. Carolina has also tried to improve their defense as well. New defensive coordinator Evero Giro coached Denver to a top 10 defense by DVOA last season, and they have a well-rounded group of guys across the unit like Derek Brown and Brian Burns on the defensive line, Shaq Thompson and Frankie Luvu, a linebacker, and JC Horn and Jeremy Chin in the secondary. But this season, they're going to have to see improvement from a plethora of guys, considering that this was not a good defense last year. Specifically, guys like Chin need to really step it up this year if they're going to have a strong defensive unit. But the presence of Ajiro will hopefully put everyone in positions to succeed. And remember, this team was just inches away from a postseason berth last season and had a really good offseason, which could help them clinch that playoff berth that proved elusive last season. As for the Falcons, they have second-year man Desmond Ridder, who actually did get to play last season. He played 4 games last season and finished with a QBR of 49.8, which could have been better, but there's still some promise with him. But Atlanta may not even have to pass that much because they might just have one of the best rushing attacks in all of football this season. Tyler Algier was arguably the most efficient rookie running back last year with nearly 5 yards per carry. Cordero Patterson remains their versatile weapon, and oh by the way, they added Bijan Robinson, who is one of the best running back prospects we've seen in a while. All three will be running behind guys like Jake Matthews and Caleb McGarry on the offensive line, as well as Chris Lindstrom, who's arguably now the best guard in the league after last season. And when Atlanta does have to pass, they have Drake London and Kyle Pitts, 2 young pass catchers with still so much potential if they're used correctly, which I very much hope Pitts is this season. Some people have seemed to have forgotten about Pitts' talents, and I can't understand why. He's still a very good tight end who can line up basically anywhere on the field, and I think he's going to have a really good 2023 season. On the other side, Atlanta's defense is almost an entirely new unit this season. In comes Ryan Nielsen from rivals New Orleans to be the defensive coordinator, and projected starters like David Onyemata, Calais Campbell, Caden Ellis, Jeff Okuda, and Jesse Bates are all new as well. Guys like AJ Terrell and Grady Jarrett are the only notable returning players. It's safe to say the Falcons have been pretty bold this offseason, and I can't say they haven't had a good one. In fact, they had a great offseason. The potential of the run game may make life easier for Ridder, and the injection of talent on the defense should give them a boost as well. But in order for Atlanta to improve, they'll need all of that new talent to get settled quickly. They'll also need a bounce-back season from Terrell, who dipped last year after an outstanding 2021 campaign. And of course, they'll need Ridder to make the leap that is definitely needed for Atlanta to contend for playoffs. Some people see them as a sleeper team, and I'm a bit skeptical of that, but it's hard not to imagine at least a slight improvement from them. When I look at the NFC East this season, I see a tug-of-war at the top between the Eagles and Cowboys, a team that's just playing second fiddle to them in the Giants, although they'll still be good, and a team at the bottom of that in the Commanders. Let's start with those top 2 squads by talking about America's team in the Dallas Cowboys. This was a team that, despite having lackluster depth at receiver, a mediocre offensive line, and up-and-down play calling from Kellen Moore, still managed to have one of the best offenses in the league thanks to above-average and sometimes stellar play from Dak Prescott, and breakout seasons from both CeeDee Lamb and Tony Pollard. But much of what brought the Cowboys down offensively is now gone. Dalton Schultz and Noah Brown have left, and Brandon Cooks is now in from the Texans. Cooks is still a pretty good wide receiver and should be a high-end wide receiver too that takes the pressure off Lamb from having to do everything in the passing game. And Pollard is still around to lead the run game as well. Brian Schottenheimer is the new offensive coordinator, but head coach Mike McCarthy will be calling plays. And while I do have skepticism stemming from how McCarthy's time in Green Bay ended, I do think this will make Dallas' scheme better. You'll see more receivers on the move and plays designed for yards after catch, which should open up more space for Dak to throw into. And if you watch my video on him, you'll recognize that it's very much needed. Say what you want about Dak's turnovers, he's still one of the most cerebral quarterbacks in the league and one of its best pocket passers. And with the exception of last year, his interception numbers have been historically low. And I think that'll be the case this season with new reinforcements and an improved scheme. They should have the offense taken care of, which is a good thing because Dallas's defense is going to be extremely good. Probably elite. The pass rush is of course anchored by the monster Micah Parsons alongside DeMarcus Lawrence, and Stephon Gilmore joins Trayvon Diggs in the secondary. Diggs improved in his coverage abilities last season, and Gilmore might have been even better. He was still very good in coverage, being in the 92nd percentile in coverage grade, 93rd percentile in single coverage grade, and the 98th percentile in coverage in the slot. The safety trio of Malik Hooker, Jaron Curse, and Donovan Wilson will also be really good too. Dallas's offense will put up points, but the defense should be even better, and on paper, this is one of the best rosters the Cowboys have had in a while. But is it enough to overtake the Eagles? Because they have a fantastic roster as well. Jalen Hurts had a breakout year, solidifying himself as a great, bona fide franchise quarterback. And around him, the Eagles are stacked on both sides of the ball. But Philly had a lot of roster reshuffling to do this offseason. Guys like Javon Hargrave, Isaac Sumalo, CJ Gardner-Johnson, and both starting linebackers in TJ Edwards and Kizzer White left. But they did a good job in replacing most of them. The Eagles drafted Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith on the defensive line, DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny to replace Miles Sanders, and have a lot of young guys ready to step up like Cam Jurgens, Nakobe Dean, and Jordan Davis. So I think they're going to be fine this season. Other than that, there's not much else I have to say about the Eagles, other than I think they're still going to be elite. And the reason I don't really have much to say about that is because it's pretty self-evident as to why they're going to be elite. AJ Brown has been the perfect fit for this offense. Devontae Smith backs him up well. They've retained their cornerback duo of Darius Slay and James Bradbury, which is one of the best CB duos in all of football, and still have Hassan Reddick, who's an elite pass rusher despite his run-stopping struggles. So yeah, I think the Eagles are still very much contenders, and it should make for a fantastic division title race with the Cowboys. And I know, the Giants made some improvements, but I don't think it's enough to catch Philly and Dallas. That's not a knock on them, it's just that both of those teams are stacked. Regardless, this is still a team that should make the playoffs. Brian Daboll really got the best out of Daniel Jones last season, even if that best is still around league average, and him and OC Mike Kafka's scheme make things so easy in the short and intermediate passing game, which works well for Jones. That scheme should fit new tight end Darren Waller extremely well, who's someone that's going to make an immediate impact in a fantastic way. Of course, Saquon Barkley, one of the league's most dynamic running backs, is still around after his contract debacle, and while Isaiah Hodgins and Darius Slayton don't make the best receiver duo, they should be serviceable weapons alongside new signing Paris Campbell. On defense, new signing Bobby Okereke was a much needed addition to linebacker, and he'll be behind what should be a pretty solid pass rush this season. Dexter Lawrence and Leonard Williams make for a frightening duo in the interior, and guys like Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari should improve on the edge. Besides Xavier McKinney, I do have some questions about the Giants' secondary. Deonte Banks is a rookie, and having Adoree Jackson as your CB1 is questionable just because he can be wildly inconsistent. And ultimately, that could lead to the downfall of the defense. Outside of Okereke, there wasn't much added to a defense that finished 29th in defensive DVOA last season, and I think they'll only make a slight improvement off that and finish below average. But the Giants, like I said, should still make the playoffs regardless. Now we get to the Commanders, and I know, they did their best this offseason. They have Eric Bieniemy as their offensive coordinator, they brought in a couple new offensive linemen in Andrew Wiley and Nick Gates, and they even finally got rid of Dan Snyder as owner. But I'm still skeptical of Washington. Most of that's got to do with Sam Howell, even though he's looked decent in preseason. Even with guys like Terry McLaurin at receiver, it's hard to see Howell making the necessary leaps, but the Commanders on par with the rest of the teams in their division. Jacoby Brissett is a serviceable backup if things don't work out, but the Commanders seem to be putting all their chips in on Howell this season, and I just don't think he's going to work out like they think. And even with the additions of Wiley and Gates, I don't think Washington is going to have a great offensive line this season, especially when you go up against guys like Micah Parsons, Hassan Reddick, and Dexter Lawrence 6 times in a season. The running back duo of Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson should be solid for them, but what the Commanders have on offense right now just isn't a recipe for success. But Washington's defense will be really good. That defensive line goes 4 deep with Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, Montez Sweat, and Chase Young, if he can stay healthy. Kendall Fuller and Cameron Curl will hold down the secondary, even if they reached on Emmanuel Forbes in the first round. I don't see why they can't finish around top 15 or even top 10 in DVOA. But man, I think Howell might be their downfall. I really do. It's not even a Falcons situation where you may have a great running game or a really good offensive line to make up for any passing deficiencies. They need Howell to be a good passer if they want to succeed. Washington's defense will prevent them from being completely terrible. It's a team that can reach for about 7 or 8 wins, but whether they can compete for playoffs, especially against Dallas, Philly, and the Giants, will be on whoever plays quarterback, and I just don't think Howell can take them above last in the NFC East. But hey, the future looks somewhat bright, at least for the first time in God knows how long, so at least there's that. The 49ers are obviously the team to beat in the NFC West, and as the season goes on, they may be the team to beat in the entire NFC as well. I'm expecting Brock Purdy to start a quarterback if he's fully healthy, because I do think that right now, he's the best guy to help them win over Trey Lance. It's not that I think Lance is a bust just yet, he just needs some reps, time, and development, and the 49ers aren't really in a position to give him all of that right now. And that's because the 49ers are in a position to win. And Purdy played solid last year, so I'm not really concerned about how he's going to play this season. I don't think Purdy is going to change the way Kyle Shanahan runs his offense too much. He's more athletic than Jimmy Garoppolo, but he plays almost exactly like him, so I don't see much of a change in the way San Francisco's scheme is built. The offensive line besides Trent Williams might be just average, especially on the right side after losing Mike McGlinchey and not replacing him that well. But the rest of the offense will be great. They still have Debo, Kittle, McCaffrey, and a plethora of depth at skill positions. On the other side, the 49ers did lose some depth on defense, especially on the defensive line like Samson Ebukam and Charles Omenihu, but they did sign Javon Hargrave to pair with Arik Armstead in the interior, which is a fantastic upgrade over Javon Kinlaw. And because of those departures to Ebukam and Omenihu, Drake Jackson should see an increased role, and he was alright in the small amount of playing time he got, so I see some confidence in him. I think Charvarius Ward really established himself as a CB1 after an excellent 2022 season, and while Diamador Lenore could have been better in the regular season, he did have a fantastic postseason and should be able to build off that in 2023. Of course, Nick Bosa and Fred Warner will have stellar seasons as well, being two of the best guys at their respective positions, and Talanoa Hufanga may just be getting started after an All-Pro 2022 season. Overall, this team is still in a position to contend. How far do they go? We'll just have to wait and see.
There's a gap between the 49ers and the rest of their division rivals, but the Seahawks could be improved in 2023. Of course, Geno Smith had a very unique breakout last season. They returned a good wide receiver duo in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, and added first-round pick Jackson Smith-Njigba to it as well. Barring injury, there's little reason to believe he won't be a 700 to 800 yard guy every single season, especially when he's put in the slot in a good passing offense alongside talented receivers like Metcalf and Lockett. He's a very fluid route runner, and I think he'll win Offensive Rookie of the Year this season. In addition, I think Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas should both see improvements at the tackle positions, which is great news for Kenneth Walker, who is one of the best rookie running backs last season. Seattle's defense is interesting to evaluate. I think their secondary is going to be one of the best in the league because man, it is stacked. Tariq Woolen was the best rookie corner last season besides Sauce Gardner, and he's a really good ball hawk. They paired another first-round pick in Devon Witherspoon alongside him, who should compete for Defensive Rookie of the Year, and they also have a really good safety duo in Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. I really hope Adams can stay healthy this year because he and Diggs complement each other so well. Diggs is the coverage guy and Adams plays more in the box, and I think it works out well for the Seahawks if neither gets hurt. The Seahawks really do go 4 deep in the secondary, and it's going to be a nightmare for quarterbacks this season. They brought back Bobby Wagner at linebacker as well, who, contrary to what some might tell you, is still one of the best linebackers in the league. But the pass rush is obviously the weak link of this defense, and that's what makes Seattle so hard to evaluate on that side of the ball. Uchenna Nwosu is a solid pass rusher, but there really isn't much depth behind him. Boye Mafi and Derek Hall are 2 young guys with potential, but that's about it at edge rusher. Draymond Jones is an okay defensive tackle that they signed, but he's nothing special, and the same goes for Jerron Reed. They may not rush the passer a whole lot, but they will defend the pass a whole lot. How that balances out is something we're going to find out soon.
The Rams are coming off one of the worst title defenses of all time, and I don't see that much room for improvement in 2023. The Rams did struggle a lot with injuries last season, most notably to their best players like Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, and Cooper Kupp, but even if they're healthy all year, there's not that much of a supporting cast around them. Donald isn't really surrounded by anyone notable on the defensive line at all, and it doesn't look that good behind him either. I look at the projected starters for the Rams defense, and I just don't see that much to be optimistic about, and that's why I'm not expecting much from the unit. Raheem Morris is a good defensive coordinator, but he's going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting if the Rams defense is going to be anywhere near good this season. Stafford and Kupp are a bit better off on the offensive end, but not by much. Cam Akers had a decent season after a terrible Week 1 start. The Rams still have Van Jefferson and signed DeMarcus Robinson, who's a decent receiver. Tutu Atwell could get better, and Tyler Higbee is a real solid tight end. But they're going to need an improvement from receivers not named Kupp in order to have some success. Brian Allen and Rob Havenstein are two notables on the offensive line. Steve Avila was one of my favorite guards out of this year's draft, so I'm optimistic about him. But the defense is going to probably give up a lot of points, and who knows if the offense can compensate for that. Sean McVay is a great play caller, one of the best in the league, but like Morris, he'll have to do a lot of heavy lifting, and I'm not sure his coaching can prevent another losing season from happening. Sorry, Rams fans.
As for the Cardinals, I don't really know what to say about them other than the fact that I think they're going to be atrocious this season. Kyler Murray is still recovering from injury, your wide receiver core isn't really that great, your offensive line is going to be average at best, especially in the interior, your defensive line lacks a strong or even decent pass rusher, although B.J. Ojulari does have the potential to be something, and your cornerbacks aren't too special either unless we see a massive step up from guys like Marco Wilson. And oh yeah, the uniforms still aren't that great either. I think the Cardinals are going to be one of the worst teams in the league this season, if not the worst, because they don't really have a roster that inspires much. That isn't to say there isn't no talent floating around. I've always thought Marquise Brown has been an underrated receiver, James Conner is a solid running back, I think Paris Johnson will hit the ground running at tackle, and Budda Baker is still one of the best safeties in football. And I know he's gotten some slack, but I don't think Jonathan Gannon was a bad hire, and I think he'll definitely institute a better culture than what Cliff Kingsbury had. But the rest of the roster is at best below average, and at worst, bad enough to be a bottom feeder. I'm sorry, Cardinals fans, I just don't see a good season coming for you guys. Our final division is the NFC North, and I don't know about everyone else, but I'm really buying into the Lions hype.
I know it's become popular by stocking them, but there's a really good reason to.
They barely missed the playoffs last season and are coming off a really good offseason where they added CJ Gardner-Johnson, Cameron Sutton, Marvin Jones, David Montgomery, and drafted some nice rookie talent like Jahmyr Gibbs, Brian Branch, Jack Campbell, and Sam Laporta. And say what you want about the position those guys were drafted in, I think Detroit came out of the draft with a solid group of players.
Gibbs will be running behind one of the best offensive lines in football with Taylor Decker, Frank Ragnow, and Penei Sewell, the latter of whom still has lots of potential to grow.
Amon-Ra St. Brown established himself as one of the best slot receivers in the league last year, and Jameson Williams should contribute in a big way once he gets back from his gambling suspension. And I can't overstate how retaining offensive coordinator Ben Johnson was huge for them. I thought he was getting a head coaching job last season, but after coaching one of the best offenses in the league last year, he decided to stick around, and that's really good news for Detroit. I can't forget about Jared Goff either, who had a really good 2022 season and has re-established himself as a solid starting quarterback in this league, so good for him. However, Detroit's defense is still a major cause for concern. It was one of the worst defenses in the league last season, coming in at 28th in defensive DVOA, but the additions of guys like Sutton and Gardner-Johnson should make it a little better. Aiden Hutchinson's potential is through the roof, and I think he's got the potential to be one of the best pass rushers in football in a few years' time. And I think Alan McNeil has the potential for a breakout season at defensive tackle alongside him. His 29 pressures and 24 stops were solid totals for a guy who only got 420 snaps last season, and keep in mind that he plays in the interior. I think the Lions are still going to have a below average defense when you stack it up with the rest of the league, but it shouldn't be as much of a liability as it was last year. The Vikings are an interesting team to look at this season, because I don't think they got better in the offseason, but I don't think they got worse either.
And the reason I say that is because for almost every guy they lost, they made every attempt at bringing in replacements.
Out went Adam Thielen, and in came rookie Jordan Addison, who should fill the wide receiver 2 role soundly as a savvy, agile wideout. Patrick Peterson departed as well, but they brought in Byron Murphy as his replacement, which I think as of now is a downgrade, but Murphy is still a young corner with lots to prove, so we'll see what happens. I'd like to see him improve in his coverage first and foremost. I can't say the same though about Marcus Davenport replacing Zadarius Smith at edge rusher though. I think that's an obvious downgrade, and Davenport probably isn't getting that much better.
Daniel Hunter is still around though after recording 70 pressures and 12 sacks last year, proving he's still a very good player in this league.
But honestly, I'm not sure if I should expect much from Minnesota's defense, even though the presence of new defensive coordinator Brian Flores should make an impact.
The secondary doesn't look too impressive. Harrison Smith had a decline last season, and the Vikings are needing a lot of young guys like Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth, and Cameron Bynum to make some leaps. And unless all of them can, it might be rough there in that unit.
The same can be said for Brian Asamoah as he tries to make a step up to replace Eric Kendricks at linebacker. However, Kirk Cousins will lead what should be a really good offense, and it's hard not to be when you have the best receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson around. On the offensive line, Christian Darrisaw really took a step up last year, solidifying himself as one of the league's best tackles, and Brian O'Neill complements him well on the other side. The biggest question for me is if Alexander Mattison can really be Minnesota's top running back after Dalvin Cook's departure, but the Vikings will pass more than they run, so as long as Mattison gives you serviceable production, Minnesota should be fine. The Vikings will be a solid team this year, but I think they hit a plateau in the offseason. As I mentioned, I don't think they got better or worse, and the problem with that is I think others in their division got better, which is going to make it difficult for Minnesota to keep hold of their division crown and make the playoffs again. Now we get to two teams with quarterback questions, with one hoping their guy makes a big leap, while the other is wondering what they even have with their guy at all. Let's first start with the former, and that's the Bears. I think if there's a team that can make a rapid ascent like the Jaguars did last year, it's Chicago. Why? Because they added a lot in the offseason, and I mean a lot. They added a true wide receiver 1 in DJ Moore, a solid guard in Nate Davis, and one of the best pure tackles in this year's draft in Darnell Wright. He'll slide in at right tackle opposite Braxton Jones, who really surprised me with how quickly he developed into a bona fide starter. But we have to talk about Justin Fields, and let me be the first to tell you that I'm a big believer in him this season. He may not reach elite levels, but I think he could reach the tier of a Kirk Cousins or Tua Tagovailoa this year. And like the Dolphins did with Tua, the Bears added a lot of talent to surround their young quarterback.
That helped Dak Prescott when the Cowboys added Amari Cooper. That helped Josh Allen when the Bills added Stephon Diggs. It helped Tua last year when Tyreek Hill came in. And I don't see why the same can't happen with Fields now that Moore and others are in town.
Despite the absolute best efforts of people to try and ignore it, Fields made obvious improvements in both running and passing last year. And I think the added talent will only improve him more in that area. The main things he'll have to improve are timing, anticipation, and the accuracy of his throws. And the truth is that the added pass protection and improved pass catchers are going to make an impact, whether people want to admit it or not. I think we're going to see it, and I think some of you might be very surprised with what you see from him this year. But enough about Fields and the offense, let's talk about some of Chicago's defensive additions. TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds instantly became one of the league's best linebacker duos from the moment they both signed with the Bears, and DeMarcus Walker and Yannick Ngakoue are both decent veteran additions to the defensive line. All of those guys should make Chicago's front seven better, and they have a lot of young guys in their secondary ready to improve as well. Jaquan Brisker had a good rookie season, and I think rookie corner Tyreek Stevenson can make an impact as well. If he has to turn and burn with receivers, it may not work out for him, but he did a really good job at preventing receivers from having a chance to do that at all in Miami. Additionally, Jalen Johnson will still be solid like he always is alongside him. Will the Bears go from 3 wins to a winning record? Probably not, but there's a lot to be excited about with Chicago. If Fields makes the improvements I think he will, their future is extremely bright. And if he doesn't, hey, they got 2 first-round picks next year to draft his replacement. Now on to the Packers and Jordan Love, who is finally getting a shot after Aaron Rodgers' messy departure from Green Bay. I don't really know what to think of Love yet, mostly because we haven't even seen much of him. He looked okay in the games he had to play last season, but there's so much unknown about him that I can't really make an accurate judgment of him yet. Surrounding Love are a group of young pass catchers who are just as hungry to prove something like Love is. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, and Luke Musgrave are all first or second year guys with potential ranging from decent to very high. That very high potential tab is especially true for guys like Watson, who really showed he can be a deep ball threat last season. Mixed in with that are veterans like Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, and Elgton Jenkins, which gives the Packers a well-rounded group of guys on offense. How far this offense goes is really dependent on how Love plays, and I think he can be okay, but he doesn't have much proven talent around him, and he himself isn't proven either. Whether that hurts him or not remains to be seen, but I think Green Bay's projection is a bit below average on offense right now, but it could get higher as the season goes along. On the other side, Green Bay's defense finished around middle of the pack last year at 20th in defensive DVOA, and I think that'll be the case this year given there really wasn't much done to improve the unit in the offseason. But in spite that, there is absolutely premium talent on this side of the ball. Jair Alexander is one of the league's best corners, Rashawn Gary is a very efficient edge rusher, and Devondre Campbell is a really good linebacker and someone who I think we should be talking about more. But with all that being said, I can't see how Green Bay's defense improves to being an above average defense, because again, there isn't anyone that was added who can cause that improvement.
Green Bay's defense won't be terrible by any means, and it may catch fire at certain points in the season just because of the talent that they have, but they'll drop some stinkers too. I think it'll be a slightly above average defense by season's end, if it can get there. This video is already long enough, so I'll keep this brief. The NFC is very top heavy. There's a clear top 3 in the Eagles, 49ers, and Cowboys, and then there's everyone else. Because of that, Philly has a great chance of making it back to the Super Bowl, but that's really hard to do, so it's been challenging for me to predict it, and I think a team in their own division has gotten a lot closer to them. Here's what I think. My division winners are the 49ers, Cowboys, Lions, and Panthers. The Eagles are obviously my top wildcard pick because of this, followed by the Seahawks and Giants. In the wildcard round, Dallas beats New York, Seattle beats Detroit, and Philly crushes Carolina. In the divisional, the 49ers and Cowboys both win before the former punches their ticket to the Super Bowl in the NFC Championship game. That'll be it here. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment your thoughts, and share this video with others. And as always, thanks for watching.